Before I start, I would really like to ask you if you could please like and subscribe, as it helps me make more videos. Thank you. I thought it was just a trick of the streetlights until it started moving on its own. I live alone on the top floor of a high-rise apartment. It's not fancy, but I like it. The view alone is worth the rent. City lights stretching endlessly, the hum of traffic below, quiet enough at night that you can hear your own thoughts. It started one Tuesday evening. I was working late on my laptop, sprawled across the couch, when I glanced at the large living room window behind me. Nothing unusual, just a familiar reflection of my apartment. Or so I thought. There was a shadow. At first, I froze. My apartment was empty. I live alone. I double-checked the room. Nothing. Just the couch, my laptop, and the lamp in the corner. I turned back to the window. The shadow was still there, but it wasn't like mine. It didn't match my movements. It was taller, hunched slightly forward like someone was leaning in from the outside. I blinked, turned around, empty room. My heart was racing. Maybe it was the reflection from the street. Someone passing by, but the lights on the street were sparse. Nobody was there. The next night I noticed it again. Same time, same spot. I tried ignoring it, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But then it started to move on its own. Not a normal human movement. Smooth, fluid, sliding across the glass like water. I tried rational explanations. Fatigue, shadows, streetlights, but it didn't make sense. It didn't follow physics. I even turned off all the lights, sat in complete darkness, but the shadow was still there, hovering and shifting. I started photographing the window each night, trying to capture it. When I looked at the pictures the next day, my blood ran cold. The shadow wasn't just a shadow. It had a shape, like a face, pale, featureless, except for two black holes where the eyes should be staring. I stopped sleeping properly. Every little noise made me jump. My friends thought I was stressed or overworked. I didn't tell them the whole truth. How do you explain something that defies logic? Then came the note. I woke up one morning and taped to the window on the outside, in perfect letters, "You can see me." I live 20 stories up. No balcony, no ledge, no way to tape something from the outside without falling to certain death. I pulled the curtains, called the building manager. He shrugged, said maybe it was kids with a drone or something, but no drone was ever found. The worst part, it wasn't satisfied with just existing in the reflection. A week later, I came home late. City lights flickering, rain tapping the glass. I switched on the lights, and in the reflection, it was closer. Not at the edge of the window anymore. It was directly behind me. I froze, my laptop open, the reflection clear. Two black holes where eyes should have been. Its hand stretched toward me, long and thin. Then it blinked. I spun around. Empty apartment, heart hammering, shaking. I grabbed my keys and went to the lobby. The building manager was gone. Security cameras had nothing. Since then, I've lived with the curtains closed all the time. I avoid that side of the building during the night. Sometimes when the city is silent, I swear I see a faint outline in the glass, leaning closer, waiting. I don't know what it wants. I don't know if it's real, but I know it's there. I kept hearing it for weeks, and every time I checked, nothing was there. Until I finally caught it. I rented a room in an older duplex downtown. The kind of building with creaky hardwood floors, peeling paint, and the faint smell of mildew that clung to the walls no matter how much you cleaned. The landlord told me the upstairs unit was empty. The previous tenant had moved out months ago. The first few nights were uneventful. I unpacked, slept, woke up, went to work. But then the noises started. At first, it was subtle, just small creaks, like someone shifting their weight above me. I told myself it was the building second, old wood contracting. But then the sounds got more deliberate. Footsteps pacing above my head at 2 a.m., scratches on the ceiling, muffled thumps like someone moving furniture. Always at night, always when I was trying to sleep. I started locking my door, shutting every window, even propping a chair under my doorknob. I didn't feel safe. A week in, I decided to investigate. I grabbed a flashlight and went upstairs, hoping to find an explanation. The hallway in the empty unit was dark and silent. At first, I found nothing. No furniture, no evidence. But then in one corner, I noticed a faint indentation in the carpet, like someone had been sleeping there. My mind raced. Was someone actually living above me? I called the landlord, who insisted the unit was empty. He even said maintenance had checked. Maybe it's just rodents or plumbing, he just suggested, but my gut told me otherwise. Over the next few nights, the sound intensified. Footsteps pacing slowly back and forth, directly above my bedroom. Sometimes I heard breathing, long, measured, deliberate. I didn't know what to do. Calling the police felt excessive. What would I say? Someone's walking above me in an empty apartment? I mean, they think I was paranoid. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the flashlight, crept upstairs, and followed the sound to the very back of the unit. There, shoved into the corner, was a small, tattered blanket and a half-empty water bottle. Someone had been living there, hiding in plain sight. For weeks. I locked the door behind me and didn't go back up. The next day, I moved some of my belongings closer to the stairwell, ready to leave at a moment's notice. Eventually, the landlord changed the locks. I moved out a month later. Even now, whenever I stay in an older building, I am hyper aware of every creak, every draft, every small sound in the night. I double check every door and closet, because somewhere in the shadows of an old, forgotten apartment, someone could be living unnoticed, watching, waiting. It was early October when my dad asked me to check on my uncle's old hunting cabin in northern Montana. My uncle, James, had passed away that summer. The cabin had been his favorite escape, but since his death, no one had been out there. My dad wanted to make sure no animals or squatters had broken in before the snow came. I wasn't thrilled about going alone, but I agreed. It was supposed to be a quick in and out trip. The drive took about 6 hours, and the last 40 minutes were on a dirt road that got narrower and rougher as I went. The trees formed a tunnel above me, their branches clawing at the roof of my truck. When I finally reached the clearing, the cabin sat exactly how I remembered it. Small, single-story, dark wood sliding, and a tin roof. There was an old shed about 30 yards behind it, and nothing else but trees. thick, endless trees. I stepped out of the truck and was immediately struck by the silence. You don't realize how loud civilization is until you're somewhere completely devoid of it. No cars, no hum of electricity, just wind, and sometimes not even that. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of pine and dust. A few mouse droppings here and there, but otherwise fine. I unpacked, lit the old gas lantern, and started a small fire. By the time the sun went down, I was sitting by the fireplace, reading an old Field and Stream magazine from 2005. Then came that first sound, a single crack from outside, like a stick snapping. At first, I ignored it. A deer, maybe a raccoon, but then another crack, closer this time. I turned down the lantern's flame and listened. The forest had gone dead quiet, and that's what unnerved me the most. No crickets, no owls, just the faint creaking of trees in the distance. Then I heard it, a whistle. Low, drawn out like someone calling a dog. My stomach dropped. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it through the small front window. The beam caught the fog of my breath against the glass. Then nothing but trees. I'd stood there for maybe a minute, waiting until something moved between the trunks. A tall silhouette, maybe 6 feet or more, standing motionless about 20 yards away. The flashlight beam shook in my hand. I blinked, and when my eyes refocused, the figure was gone. I told myself I imagined it. I locked the front door, checked the windows, and went to bed with the rifle beside me. Then, sometime around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps on the gravel outside. Slow, deliberate, crunching steps circling the cabin. I held my breath, trying to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Then I heard it again. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I peeked out of the window, but I didn't see anything. Then, from the corner of the glass, a light flickered. A lantern, old-fashioned, swinging slowly as someone walked. My heart started pounding. I crouched and looked closer. There was a man standing near the edge of the clearing, holding the lantern chest high. His face was shadowed, but I could tell he wasn't alone. There were 2 others behind him, spaced apart, each holding their own lights. They weren't moving towards the cabin, they were just watching. I wanted to call someone, but I had no service. The landline inside hadn't worked for years. My truck keys were by the door, but there was no way I was walking out there with 3 strangers staring at me. I waited for what felt like hours. Eventually the lanterns dimmed, one by one, until they were gone. When the sun rose, I stepped outside. The air was freezing, but the daylight made me feel safer. That comfort vanished when I saw the footprints. 3 distinct sets pressed deep into the damp earth. They led from the trees to the side of the cabin and stopped right beneath my bedroom window. I got chills so bad my knees went weak. Something about those prints. They weren't just footprints. They were drag marks beside them, as if one of them had been pulling something. Or someone. I packed my things, locked the door, and started driving back toward the main road. About halfway down the dirt, I passed a fallen tree blocking the way. It wasn't there the day before. I got out, ready to move, hesitated, then noticed something carved into the bark. It was a crude symbol, a circle with 3 straight lines running through it like spokes, and under it etched deeper, "See you tonight." I didn't move that tree. I drove it around the ditch, scraping the truck's side panels, and didn't stop until I hit pavement. A few days later, my dad and the local sheriff went back to check. They found the tree, the symbol, and the footprints exactly where I said they'd be. They also found something I hadn't seen. A small, freshly dug hole near the tree line, about the size of a human body, empty. The sheriff told us it looked like someone had started digging it the night of the storm, then abandoned it when the ground froze. I never went back after that. The cabin still stands, but no one in my family had the courage to set foot there again. Sometimes late at night, I think about those 3 men standing at the edge of the clearing. How they didn't move, they didn't speak, they just watched. And how the next morning the prints showed they'd come right up to my window. If I hadn't woken up when I did, if I hadn't turned off the lantern, I don't think I'd be here telling this story. If you had made it this far somehow, I would really appreciate it if you could like and comment what was your favorite story. And until next time, see you. Before I start, I would really appreciate if you could hit the like button and subscribe, as it helps me make more videos. I used to think libraries were the safest places in the world. Quiet, neutral, filled with people who kept to themselves. When I moved to a new city for work, the public library became my go-to spot. I didn't know anyone yet, and I liked how anonymous it felt. The quiet hum of lights, the smell of old books, the rhythm of people coming and going. That's where I first noticed him. At first, he was just another regular, mid-40s maybe, wore a tweed jacket even when it was warm. Always had a thermos and a yellow notepad. He'd sit at the same table every day near the back, where the non-fiction shelves curved around into a half-enclosed space. He didn't talk to anyone, didn't make noise. Sometimes I'd glance up from my laptop and see him writing, pages and pages, neat block letters, never stopping. The first weird thing happened after about a week. I was packing up to leave, and he stopped me as I walked by. He said, "You always come in at 4:15. I laughed awkwardly, like he was joking, but he didn't smile. He just said, "I like people who keep routines." I told myself he was harmless. Libraries attract all kinds. But the next day, I came in at a different time, around 2 o'clock, and he was already sitting there. Same table, thermos, notepad, everything. When I passed by, he said without looking up, "Early today." That night, I couldn't shake it. It wasn't just what he said. It was the way he knew. I started changing my schedule every day, showing up at random hours. It didn't matter. He was always there first, always in that same seat. Then one afternoon, as I was typing, I noticed movement in the reflection of my laptop screen. He was looking at me, not casually glancing, but staring directly, completely still. I packed up and left early. The next few days I avoided the library altogether, but I missed the routine, and eventually I told myself I'd imagined it. When I went back, he wasn't there. Relief hit me hard enough that I actually smiled. Then I noticed something on my usual table. A small yellow note folded once. It said in neat block letters, You broke your routine. I told the front desk, showed them the note. They checked the cameras, but apparently the back section wasn't covered. The city hadn't funded that part of the system yet. I stopped going for a few months. Then, one morning before work, I saw him again. Not in the library. He was standing across the street from my apartment building, holding a thermos, watching the windows. I moved out 2 weeks later. I don't use libraries anymore. When you travel for work, hotels start to blur together until one of them doesn't. I travel a lot for my job. Almost every week I'm in a new city, a new hotel, a new set of walls I don't know I'm supposed to feel safe in. Most of the time, it's uneventful. I check in, unpack, maybe eat dinner in the lobby or grab takeout, work late, sleep, and leave the next morning. It's routine, boring, but easy. This particular trip was in early spring, a small town in the Midwest. Not much around besides a couple of chain hotels and gas stations. The company had booked me into a mid-range chain. The kind of place that looks fine in photos online, but has that distinct smell of bleach, cheap carpet, and lingering fried food in the lobby. When I arrived, the receptionist handed me the key card and said, "Room 308, elevators to your left. Enjoy your stay." I barely looked at her. I'd done this 1,000 times before. Room 308 was exactly what I expected. Beige walls, 2 queen beds, a desk facing a blank TV screen, and heavy curtains I could close completely. The bathroom was standard. White tile, faint mildew smell, little toiletries. I unpacked the essentials, threw my suitcase on the bed, and went down to grab dinner. By the time I came back, it was after 11 p.m. I made a sandwich, opened a soda, and tried to relax. The room was quiet. I even opened the window slightly, the spring air drifting in faintly, until I noticed a soft noise. Click. It was rhythmic, almost like someone tapping on metal. My first thought was that it was the air conditioning vent. I ignored it. Click, pause, click, pause. It kept going. I sat up and turned on the light. Nothing changed. The sound stopped for a moment, then resumed. I leaned closer to the vent above the desk. Nothing was visible, just the regular ductwork, beige like the walls. I tried to laugh it off. Hotel sounds, pipes, drafts, whatever. I shut the window, turned on the TV for background noise, and went to bed. At 2 a.m. I woke again. The clicking had started up once more. This time I noticed a shadow moving behind the vent cover. My heart slammed. It was fast, deliberate, but before I could get a closer look, it disappeared. I called the front desk and asked to switch rooms. The woman on the other end sounded tired. "We'll send maintenance to check in the morning. There's nothing that can be done right now." I went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. Every tiny noise, the hum of the AC, the creak of the bed frame, the faint movement of the curtains, made me flinch. I convinced myself I was imagining it, that travel stress and lack of sleep were making me paranoid. Morning came, and I checked out early. I asked the receptionist about the vent. She said, "Room 308. Maintenance said there's nothing unusual. The duct connects to 310, which hasn't been rented in months." I forced a laugh. Fine, nothing to worry about, just coincidence. That evening I returned. Room 308 was ready. The noise hadn't occurred during the day, and I convinced myself I could handle one night. Around 11:30 p.m., I started working at the desk. The vent was above my left shoulder. I tried to ignore it, but my peripheral vision kept catching movement, and the clicking began. Click, pause, click, pause. I held my breath. Then came another sound, a slow, steady exhale. Not a draft, not the AC. Someone was breathing. I froze. My mind screamed to leave, but I was caught between disbelief and fear. I switched on every light in the room. The shadow behind the vent didn't move. I grabbed my phone to call the front desk again, but the signal was weak. Click, pause, click. The vent cover had shifted slightly. Just a tiny gap, but enough that I could see the metal of the duct behind it. And that was when I noticed it. Scratch marks, thin, dark, jagged lines along the metal. Someone had been inside. I grabbed my bag, shoved it against the door, and called 911. I didn't know what else to do. The dispatcher told me to stay calm, stay in the room, and not touch anything. They said officers would arrive quickly. When they did, they inspected the room carefully. They didn't find anyone, but they checked the crawl space above the vent. They found an old folding chair wedged against the duct, a thermos, and a small hole cut into the metal facing room 308. Someone had been living in the ceiling. The officers asked if I'd seen anyone around the hotel acting suspiciously. I told them I hadn't. They said the intruder hadn't been using the elevators, hadn't checked in, hadn't signed in anywhere. Someone had been sneaking in and out through service entrances, crawling through vents, and living above my room. They assured me that security would watch 308 from now on, and offered to move me to another floor. I accepted immediately. I didn't care about convenience or comfort. I just wanted to feel safe. That night, I didn't sleep more than an hour. Every small noise made me tense. Every creak of the ceiling, every vent rattle, every distant thump in the hall sent adrenaline shooting through me. By morning, I checked out early. I didn't even eat breakfast. I barely looked around. I left the hotel, drove straight to the airport, and swore I would never stay there again. It took me months before I could stay in a hotel room without double-checking vents, checking closets, and mentally mapping escape routes. Even now, years later, when I travel for work, I always inspect the room thoroughly before unpacking. It started innocently enough. A family friend of mine called one Friday afternoon, asking if I could house sit for the weekend. She and her husband were taking a short trip. Nothing fancy, just a couple of nights in a nearby city. And they wanted someone to water the plants, feed the cat, and bring in the mail. She offered to pay me more than I'd ever made in a weekend, which should have been my first warning. The house was beautiful, 2 stories, large windows, a spacious yard, and at the end of a long gravel driveway, it was the kind of house that felt perfect in daylight, but intimidating after dark. The street was quiet, barely any traffic, and the nearest neighbors were far enough away that you could swear the world ended at that edge of the yard. The first night was uneventful. I watched TV, fed the cat, watered the plants, and locked every door and window before going to bed. I felt a small sense of pride in being irresponsible. After all, I was practically being trusted with someone else's life. It wasn't until the second night that I noticed something strange. I woke up around midnight. The cat was hissing. Its back was arched, fur standing on end, staring towards the stairs. I froze, listening. At first, I thought it was a raccoon or a stray animal outside, but the hissing continued, low and urgent. The sound didn't come from the yard, it came from inside. I grabbed my phone, dimmed the lights, and slowly made my way to the hallway. Every step creaked and the cat darted ahead of me, its paws soft on the hardwood floor. The hallway was empty. The stairs were silent. The sliding glass door leading to the backyard was slightly ajar. I'm not proud of it, but I panicked. I locked it immediately and double-checked every other door and window. Everything seemed normal. The night was quiet again. The next morning, I went outside to survey the yard. That's when I noticed the muddy footprints leading from the back door toward the tree line. They were bare footprints, adult size, but not huge. The prints didn't go far, just toward the dense trees that marked the property boundary. I called the homeowners. Maybe it was an animal, I suggested, though I didn't believe it myself. They told me to stay calm, keep the doors locked, and call the police if it ever happened again. That night I made sure every door was locked, windows latched, and even propped a chair under the front doorknob. I turned off all unnecessary lights and tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. Around 12:30 a.m. I heard the motion light outside click on. I peeked through the blinds, nothing, just the yard, the trees were still. I exhaled slowly, ready to tell myself it was nothing. Then I noticed a shadow move near the tree line. A figure standing perfectly still, watching. I froze. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The shadow didn't step closer. It didn't retreat. It just stood there, long enough that I felt the weight of its presence pressing against the window. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I stayed by the front door, clutching my phone, convinced I'd hear someone moving inside at any moment. By morning, the figure was gone. I called the police. They arrived within 20 minutes, patrolling the perimeter, checking doors, windows, and the yard. They found the footprints from the previous night, and oddly, handprints on the sliding glass door, smudges that looked like someone else had pressed against the glass to look inside. They said it was likely a drifter passing through, but they couldn't find anyone in the area. I didn't sleep that night either. The house, which had seemed cozy before, now felt like a trap. Every floorboard, every draft, every squeak sounded amplified. The cat refused to leave my side, hissing at corners of the rooms that were empty. Next morning, I tried to rationalize everything. Maybe the footprints were raccoon-sized. Maybe the handprints were for maintenance. I don't know. My rational brain was fighting a deep sense of dread that something had been inside that house while I slept. I spent the rest of the day keeping the doors locked and triple-checking every entry point. I refused to touch anything outside. The cat, thankfully, seemed calmer during the daylight hours, but I could feel its tension. That evening, the motion light clicked on again. I didn't look outside immediately. My hands shook too much. When I finally glanced, I saw nothing. Not the figure from before. Not even a shape in the shadows. Then I heard it. The faint scraping of a chair moving. Slow, deliberate. It sounded like it was coming from the upstairs guest room. I didn't go up. I didn't call the police. I didn't dare. I just crouched in the living room, listening to the sound fade into silence. The next morning, I decided I was done. I packed my things and left before noon. The next morning, I decided I was done. I packed my things and left before noon. I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't water the plants. I didn't feed the cat. I left a note on the kitchen counter apologizing. When the homeowners returned the following day, they called me confused. They said they had changed the locks before leaving for their trip. Someone had tampered with the front door, and in the guest room closet they found a sleeping bag and an empty water bottle. Someone had been inside the house while I was supposed to be watching it. They weren't violent. They didn't steal anything. At least nothing major. But the thought that someone had watched me moving from the space I thought was mine for the weekend left a mark I haven't shaken since. I've house sat for friends before, and I do now, but I always check the closets first. Always check the windows. Always imagine someone is hiding somewhere, waiting. Before I start on these stories, I would really appreciate it if you guys would like and subscribe, because I really want to keep bumping out content like this, and thank you so much. It's weird looking back at old Halloween pictures now, because I can't explain the extra kid in me. I grew up in a quiet cul-de-sac in my late 90s. Every Halloween, all the neighborhood kids would meet at the end of the street before going trick-or-treating together. My mom was the cameraman. She'd always make everyone line up for a photo before we ran off with our candy bags. That year, I was 9. I remember it so clearly because I'd insisted on being a vampire with a cheap cape and plastic fangs that made me lisp when I talked. My best friend Danny was a skeleton, his sister was a witch, and there were maybe 6 or 7 other kids from around the block. Mom took a few pictures with her disposable camera, told us to smile, then sent us off into the night. Nothing weird happened that I remember. We did our usual route, trading candy, daring each other to knock on the creepy house at the end of the street. Typical stuff you would do on Halloween night. I didn't think about that night again until a few months ago. My mom was cleaning out some old boxes and texted me a picture she found. One of those groups Halloween photos. At first, I just smiled. It was nostalgic, all those goofy costumes where the streetlight gave everything that warm orange glow. But then I noticed something odd. Between me and Danny, there was another kid, smaller than the rest of us, wearing what looked like a homemade ghost costume. It was just a dirty white sheet with uneven holes cut through the eyes. I texted my mom and asked, "Who's the kid in the sheet?" She replied almost right away, "What kid? That's you and Danny, no one else." I sent her a close-up of the photo, the little figure between us. She swore she had no memory of any other kid being there, and said she only remembered taking one group photo. I figured maybe one of the neighborhood kids invited a cousin or something, so I called Danny. He didn't remember anyone else either. In fact, he said, "Man, that's weird. Can kinda see his hands, but they look off." I zoomed in again. The hands sticking out from under the sheet weren't holding a candy bag like the rest of us. They were just hanging limp at the sides, fingers curled slightly inward. The skin, or what you could see of it, looked grayish. The photo quality was great, but the proportions seemed wrong too. Arms were too long, the shoulders slouched, and the sheet was falling unevenly. I didn't know what to think, so I let it go. A week later, Mom called me sounding shaky. She'd found another photo from that same night, one she didn't remember taking. It was of me and Danny standing on the porch after trick-or-treating, sorting through a candy. The ghost kid was standing behind us, right at the edge of the porch's light switch. Except this time, you could see through the hair. Mom thought maybe it was a panel glitch, double exposure or something. But here's the part that still bothers me. When I showed the photos to Danny in person, he went pale and said he didn't want to look at me. He told me that a few months after that Halloween, his family dogs were missing. Found it later at the edge of the woods behind the cul-de-sac, wrapped in what looked like old bed sheet. It had 2 uneven holes cut in it, like eyes. I used to work the night shift at a gas station downtown. Halloween nights were always the weirdest. Not terrifying exactly, just unpredictable. It was the kind of place open 24/7 near strip of bars and apartments. You get everyone, college kids stumbling in for snacks, tired Uber drivers, people in costume, still half drunk from the party. That year I was covering for someone who called out sick. I started at 10 p.m. and was supposed to lock up at 6 a.m. Around 1:30, a guy walked in wearing a cheap half mask. One of those plastic clowns you could buy at the dollar store. He only covered the top half of his face, leaving his mouth visible. He was wearing a gray hoodie and gloves, which already felt odd because it wasn't that cold. He didn't say anything, just walked slowly through the aisles. His shoes made this soft squeaking sound against the linoleum, and I remember how the motion sensors kept chiming as he passed each section. When he finally came to the counter, he had just one thing, a pack of gum. I tried to keep things casual. "Busy night," I said. He tilted his head slightly. "You'll be closing alone tonight, right?" His voice was flat, low, like he was just confirming something he already knew. It froze me. I forced a laugh and said, "Yeah, well, not really. My manager's around," which was a lie. I was definitely alone. He didn't respond, just stayed for a second longer, then turned and left, not even taking the gum. When I looked outside, the lot was empty. A few minutes later, the motion chime went off again. I glanced up. Nobody was there. I figured maybe a car had passed by the sensor, but when I checked the camera monitor, the front door was closed. There was no movement. At 3 a.m., I went to take the trash out. The dumpster was behind the store, near an alley that always smelled like stale beer and oil. I opened the lid, and sitting right on top of the trash was that same clown mask. Only now it was cracked and dirty, like it had been out there for days. I called my manager after that, said I wasn't comfortable finishing this shift alone. He said to lock up early, and he'd check the security footage in the morning. When he did, he called me back sounding confused. The camera showed me talking to someone at the counter, but in the video there's no one standing there. Just me staring straight ahead, holding a pack of gum. I've never liked talking about this because it sounds like I made it up, but it really happened, and it still keeps me up at night. This was about 6 years ago when I was in college. A friend invited me to a small Halloween get-together at his cousin's place just outside town. I didn't know many people there, but I figured it would be fun, just a few drinks, 5 day, maybe a costume contest. It was in one of those new little suburban developments where all the houses were the same. Never been to that, maybe to people. The street lights were spaced far away, so the whole place felt kind of dim and still. I got there around 9 p.m. Everyone was already drinking and laughing in the backyard. For a few hours, it was just a normal party. Around midnight, a few of us decided to go for a walk. Something about looking for a haunted house when the first guys had it. It was stupid, but we were tipsy and bored, so travelers started wandering down the long winding street. Most of them lined with identical grayish true stories and plastic skeletons in the mountains. We didn't find anything haunted, obviously, but when we started heading back, we realized we'd gone in the wrong direction. Every street looked the same, and then a phone battery had died. We eventually came to a cul-de-sac with one house that still had its porch. There was a single pumpkin on the steps, carved with paper. It looked normal, several triangles and movements. One of my friends said, "Let's just ask for directions," and walked up to the door. The rest of us waited at the curb on the park. He knocked. After a long pause, the door opened, just a crack. man's voice said something I couldn't hear. My friend said, "Hey, sorry to bother you. We're just trying to get back to Westwood quick. My phone died." The door opened wide. The man looked off, not scary exactly, just off. He was wearing an old sweater and jeans, barefoot, and his expression never changed. My curiosity, my friendliness, nothing. He said, "Yeah, Westmore's that way, and woman down the street." He thanked him, and my friend took a leave. But then the man said, "You can come in if you want, it's cold." That set off alarm bells. It wasn't cold, it was maybe 60 degrees. My friend kind of laughed it off, but the man didn't smile. He just stood there, still holding the door. The house was dark except for the glow of a single light in the hall. Something about it felt wrong. We all said no thanks and started walking away. I remember glancing back. The guy was still standing there, the door half open, staring. When we turned the corner, my friend whispered, "His fingernails were black, but really like he did anything." We all tried laughing it off, chuckling that I took bad lighting the dirt. But about a minute later, we heard something noise. Quiet, quick, like a latch being opened. I looked back, and I was following us. Not wearing a black colored hat, just walking slow and steady, barefoot, hands at his sides. He picked up the pace, trying to act casual at first. And when I looked back again, it was closer, still walking. That's when we started running. We didn't stop until we saw the familiar house where the party was. The music still faintly thumping inside. When we turned back, he was gone. We all went straight inside, slammed the door, and locked it. Nobody really talked about it after that. We were embarrassed that I was scared. But here's the part that still gets me. 2 days later, I went to that area. I went to prove to myself that I found the cul-de-sac in the house. The porch was empty, no pumpkin or decorations. The windows were boarded from the inside. When I asked the neighbor across the street, she said, "Oh, that place? Nobody's lived there for months." The man who owned it passed away back in July. She pointed at the door and added, "Someone keeps taking it for sale something." I didn't ask anything else. I just got back in my car, locked the doors, and left. Every Halloween since, when I'm walking home late, I still glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone following me, barefoot. If you have somehow made it this far, there's so much for watching. Just know that I will be posting more videos, and if you think I can do anything better, please leave it down in the comments. I'm currently doing these clips of voiceovers to get better at pronouncing words in English. As always, thanks for watching and have a spooky Halloween.